Before we get started, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop a comment and let me know. Now, let's get into the story. Damian Sterling didn't know he had a child until a humble mother brought her daughter to a job interview. The knowledge did not arrive like a thunderclap, but like the slow, unnerving creep of a tide into a house he thought was sealed. The house, in this case, was his life. A penthouse fortress of polished chrome and silent glass, 48 stories above the ceaseless thrum of the city. From up here, people were merely concepts, components in the vast, intricate machine of commerce he commanded. Damian was a master of that machine. He understood leverage, assets, and the cold, clean calculus of profit and loss. What he no longer understood was the texture of a life lived on the ground. His world had been hermetically sealed 5 years ago, the day he lost his wife, Alana. Grief for Damian was not a flood of tears, but the laying of stone. He had encased his heart in the same material that built his empire, impenetrable, cold, and ruthlessly efficient. Sterling Innovations was his cathedral and his mausoleum, a monument to ambition where personal connection went to die. His days were a metronome of board meetings, market analyses, and solitary dinners where the only sound was the clink of silverware on porcelain. A lonely echo in a room designed for dozens. Today was no different. A series of final round interviews for a junior administrative position. It was a role so far beneath his notice that his presence was absurd. Yet a scheduling error by a new executive assistant, combined with a rare lull in his own calendar, had put him here in a small, sterile conference room, playing the part of an engaged executive. He reviewed the file for the third candidate, a Sarah Jenkins. The resume was unremarkable. A string of service jobs, a community college certificate. He sighed, a sound of pure impatience. He could have and should have delegated this an hour ago. The door opened, and a woman entered, her face a mask of flustered apology. She was neat, but her blazer was undeniably worn, the fabric at the elbows shiny with age. Behind her, clutching the back of her jacket, was a small girl, no older than 6, with wide, curious eyes that seemed to drink in the intimidating space. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry," the woman, Sarah Jenkins, began, her voice trembling slightly. "My sitter canceled at the last possible second. I know this is unprofessional. I can leave. I completely understand." Damian held up a hand, not out of kindness, but to stop the flow of her words, which he found irritatingly inefficient. "Sit," he commanded, his voice flat. It was easier to get this over with than to reschedule. Sarah sat, pulling the little girl gently onto her lap. The child stared at him. It was an unnerving gaze, direct and without the deference or fear he usually saw in the adults who entered his orbit. Her hair was braided into 2 neat cornrows, and she wore a simple pink dress, a small spot of what looked like strawberry jam near the collar. But it wasn't the dress or the braids that made the air in the room suddenly feel thin, that made Damian's carefully constructed composure crack. It was her face. Specifically, it was her eyes. They were Alana's eyes. Not just the color, a warm, deep brown like polished mahogany, but their shape, the slight upward tilt at the corners, the way they seemed to hold a quiet, knowing intelligence. A ghost of a memory, so sharp and violent it was like a physical blow, struck him. Alana laughing in the morning sun of their old garden, her eyes crinkling in that exact same way. He felt a sudden, dizzying vertigo. The resume in his hands felt alien, the words blurring into meaningless shapes. He forced his gaze away from the child, back to the paper. Sarah Jenkins. No emergency contact listed. His mind, a machine trained to find patterns and solve puzzles, began to spin its gears, grinding against an impossible equation. It was a coincidence, a trick of the light, of memory playing cruel games. such resemblances happened. "Tell me about your previous position," he said, his voice colder than he intended, a defense mechanism against the chaos blooming in his chest. Sarah Jenkins began to speak, detailing her responsibilities at a small catering company. Her words were a distant hum. Damien's attention was a powerful, focused beam, and it was fixed entirely on the child, who had now leaned her head against her mother's chest, one small hand fiddling with a button on her blazer. He saw the curve of her cheek, the delicate line of her jaw. It was like looking at a photograph of his wife from a childhood he'd never known. The name Alana screamed in the silent spaces of his mind, but Alana was gone. They never had children. Her health. It had always been a delicate subject, a future they had planned to navigate but never reached. The girl, as if sensing his stare, looked up again. She didn't smile, but her expression softened, became inquisitive. "You have a sad face," she said, her voice small but clear as a bell. Sarah gasped, mortified. "Maya, hush. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. She—" "It's fine," Damien cut in, the words sharp. But it wasn't fine. For the first time in 5 years, a stranger had seen past the formidable facade of the billionaire and had named the truth of him with the simple, devastating accuracy of a child. He was a man with a sad face. He was a king in an empty castle. The interview concluded in a blur of stilted formalities. He dismissed them with a curt nod, his mind a maelstrom. As Sarah Jenkins hurried her daughter, Maya, out of the room, the girl glanced back over her shoulder. Her eyes met his one last time, and in them Damien saw not just the ghost of his wife, but a question. It was a question that would dismantle his life, brick by painful brick. "Who are you?" And the more terrifying question that echoed back from the depths of his own hollow soul. "Who am I?" He stood alone in the conference room, the silence pressing in, a profound and terrifying mystery now seated at the very center of his world. The image of the child of Maya did not fade. It was seared onto the back of his eyelids. For the rest of the day, through a tense negotiation with a Japanese tech firm and a quarterly review with his CFO, her face floated in his vision. The resemblance to Alana was too precise, too perfect to be a mere coincidence. Coincidence was a concept for the powerless. Men like Damien Sterling did not believe in it. They believed in data, in variables, in cause and effect. And the effect of this child on his psyche was seismic. He canceled his evening appointments and retreated to his penthouse. The space, usually a source of comfort in its stark, ordered silence, felt different tonight. It felt like what it was, a void. He walked through the cavernous living area, his leather shoes making no sound on the thick, custom-loomed rug. On a black marble pedestal, under a single museum-quality spotlight, sat the only personal photograph he allowed on display. It was of him and Alana on their wedding day. Her smile was radiant, her eyes full of a life that had been stolen from them both. He looked at her eyes in the photograph, then conjured the image of the little girl. Maya. They were the same. A cold dread, mingled with a sliver of something he dared not name, hope, slid down his spine. What was the meaning of this? He had built his entire life, his entire identity, on a foundation of control. Now the ground beneath him was fracturing. He picked up his phone and called Marcus Thorne. Marcus was more than his head of security. He was the closest thing Damien had to a friend, a man whose loyalty had been forged in their early, leaner years, long before the billions. "I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Sarah Jenkins," Damien said, his voice low, stripped of its usual authority. "She interviewed for an administrative position today. She has a daughter, Maya, about 6 years old." There was a pause on the other end. Marcus was accustomed to requests for corporate espionage, for detailed background checks on business rivals. This was different. "Personal matter?" Marcus asked, his tone careful. "Just do it," Damien replied, then hung up. He couldn't sleep. He paced the length of his apartment, the city lights a cold, indifferent tapestry below. His mind, a relentless engine, churned through possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. Had Alana had a secret sister? A hidden relative? He had known her family, or so he thought. They were pleasant, middle-class people from the suburbs who had always seemed slightly intimidated by his wealth. After Alana's death, the ties had frayed, then dissolved completely. The next afternoon, Marcus arrived at the penthouse, a slim file in his hand. He placed it on the glass coffee table, his expression unreadable. "Not much to it," Marcus said. "Sarah Jenkins, 34 years old. Lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Elmwood district, rented. Landlord says she's paid late 3 times in the last year. Works part-time as a server at a diner since the catering company downsized. The child, Maya, is 6. Attends the local public school. No father listed on the birth certificate." Elmwood? It was a neighborhood of aging brick walk-ups and struggling corner stores, a world away from the gleaming steel and glass of Damien's reality. He felt a strange proprietary anger at the thought of Alana's likeness, living in such a place, struggling. It made no sense. It was an irrational, emotional response, and he hated it. "Is that all?" Damien pressed, his disappointment a sharp, bitter taste. Marcus hesitated. "There's one more thing. It's probably nothing." "What is it?" "I ran Sarah Jenkins through Alana's old social media, the accounts you had me archive, not as a friend, but in the background, tagged photos from years ago." Marcus slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a photo from a bridal shower. A younger Alana was in the center, beaming, and there, standing just behind her, her arms slung around Alana's shoulders, was a younger, happier Sarah Jenkins. The caption beneath the photo read, "So grateful for my amazing maid of honor, Sarah. Couldn't do this without you." The air left Damien's lungs. Maid of honor, Alana's best friend. He had met the bridesmaids at the wedding, of course, a blur of pastel dresses and polite smiles. He hadn't paid them any real attention. His focus, as always, had been on Alana and the merger, not of companies, but of his life with hers, that she represented. He had never known her best friend's name. The realization landed with a thud of shame. How could he not have known? What else had he not known about his own wife? "I want to see them," Damien said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "From a distance." The drive to Elmwood was like a journey to a foreign country. Here the buildings were not monuments to capital, but simple shelters, their brick facades weathered, their windows decorated with children's drawings and wilting houseplants. Marcus parked the black inconspicuous sedan half a block from Sarah's apartment building. They waited. After 20 minutes, they appeared. Sarah Jenkins holding her daughter's hand. Maya was skipping, her pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders. They weren't heading for a car, but for the bus stop on the corner. Damien watched as Sarah knelt to tie Maya's shoe, her movements full of a gentle, practiced care. He watched as Maya laughed, her head thrown back, a flash of pure, unself-conscious joy. From this distance, the resemblance was even more striking. It was in the way she moved, a certain grace in her small limbs that was so reminiscent of Alana it made his chest ache. They got on the bus, and Damien felt a bizarre sense of panic, of loss, as it pulled away from the curb. "Follow them," he ordered Marcus. They followed the bus to a small city park. It was a modest square of green with a rusty swing set and a faded hopscotch court. Damien watched from the car as Sarah pushed Maya on a swing. He saw the easy intimacy between them, the shared smiles, the low murmur of their conversation, audible only to each other. He saw Maya run to the ice cream truck, Sarah counting out coins into her hand. This was their life. A world of scraped knees, bus fares, and counted coins. A world of warmth. The contrast with his own existence was a physical blow. His life was a series of transactions. Theirs was a tapestry of moments. He thought of his penthouse, silent and empty, and looked at them, bathed in the warm light of the late afternoon sun, and felt a profound soul-deep poverty he had never known. He was a billionaire. He could buy anything he wanted, but he could not buy that. "There's something else, Damien," Marcus said softly, his voice pulling Damien from his reverie. "When I was looking for the social media archives, I went through the manifests for the storage unit where you put Alana's personal effects, the things you didn't want in the house." Damien flinched. He had packed those boxes himself in a haze of grief, unable to look at her journals, her keepsake boxes, her art. It was too much. "What about it?" Damien asked, his voice tight. "One of the boxes is labeled Willow Creek Maternity. It was a clinic, a very discreet, very expensive one specializing in fertility and surrogacy. It closed down 4 years ago." The world tilted on its axis. Surrogacy. The word hung in the air inside the climate-controlled car, charged and terrifying. Alana's health. They had talked about children, but always in the abstract future. She had been worried, he recalled, about her ability to carry a child to term due to a mild heart condition she'd had since birth. He had dismissed her fears, told her they had time, that they had the best doctors. He had been so focused on building an empire for their future that he had failed to listen to her present fears. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture he could barely stand to look at. Alana, her best friend Sarah, whom she had kept separate from his world. The clinic, the child, born shortly after Alana's death, who wore his wife's face. The bus ride, the park, the scraped knee, the counted coins. It all shifted from a portrait of humble struggle to something else entirely. It was a story of a promise kept, a legacy protected, a secret held for 6 years. His secret, his legacy, his daughter. The thought was an earthquake, leveling the entire structure of his reality. He looked out the window at the little girl now chasing a pigeon, her laughter carrying on the breeze, and a feeling so powerful and raw it terrified him, rose up in his throat. It was not grief. It was not anger. It was a fierce, primal wave of possession. Mine. The drive back to the city was silent. Damien stared out at the blur of streets, but he wasn't seeing them. He was seeing a ghost, a possibility, a life that had been running parallel to his own without his knowledge. The revelation from Marcus about the Willow Creek Maternity Clinic had not been a key unlocking a door. It had been a sledgehammer to a wall. Behind it lay a landscape of secrets and unanswered questions. That night he did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He went to the storage facility. It was a sterile, climate-controlled building, another monument to things put away and forgotten. Marcus had the unit opened for him and then, with a knowing look, left him alone. The unit was filled with ghosts, boxes of clothes that still held the faint scent of her perfume, canvases from her art classes, books with her notes scribbled in the margins. He had been unable to part with any of it, yet unable to live with it. He found the box labeled Willow Creek Maternity tucked in a back corner. His hands trembled as he slit the packing tape. Inside were not medical files or clinical reports as he'd expected. Instead, there was a worn leather-bound journal, Alana's, and a small rosewood keepsake box. He opened the journal first. Her elegant script filled the pages. It was a chronicle of hope and fear. She wrote about her heart condition, her deep-seated desire for a child, and her terror that she would not be able to give him one. "Damien is so driven," she had written. "He is building an empire for us, for our future family. But what if I am the one part of his plan that is flawed? What if I fail?" The words were a knife in his chest. He had seen her ambition as a reflection of his own, but he had never truly seen the vulnerability beneath it. He read on, his heart pounding. She wrote of her plan, a secret she held close. She had found a surrogate, a friend she trusted with her life, someone from her world before him, someone who understood her in a way his high society circle never could. "Sarah is my rock," another entry read. "She's agreed to do this for us, for me. It's the greatest gift one soul can give another. I haven't told Damien yet. I want to wait until the first trimester is over, until I know it's real. I want to give him the news as a perfect, complete gift. No worries, no complications, just joy." He closed his eyes. The timing was a cruel twist of fate. The first trimester would have ended just a week before the sudden cardiac event that had taken her life. She had died with her perfect, complete gift held in secret. With unsteady hands, he picked up the rosewood box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a tiny silver locket. He opened it. On one side was a microscopic photo of Alana. On the other, a professionally taken baby picture of a newborn with a shock of dark hair and familiar, intelligent eyes. Tucked beneath the velvet was a folded piece of paper. It was a legal document, a surrogacy agreement signed by Alana Sterling and Sarah Jenkins, and beneath that another document, a copy of a birth certificate, child's name Maya Alana Jenkins, mother Sarah Jenkins, father Reyes, blank. But there was one last thing in the box, a sealed envelope with his name on it, written in Alana's hand. His fingers felt thick and clumsy as he tore it open. "My dearest Damien, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and I have left you to navigate this world alone. I am so sorry. My heart breaks at the thought of the pain you must be in, but I did not want to leave you with nothing. I wanted to leave you with everything. We have a daughter, my love. Her name is Maya. She is a piece of me and a piece of you. She is our legacy. Sarah, my oldest and dearest friend, gave us this miracle. She promised me she would watch over her, keep her safe, until the time was right. I trust her with my life, and with our daughters. I know you will be confused, and maybe even angry that I kept this from you. Please forgive me. I was a coward. I was so afraid of something going wrong, of disappointing you. I just wanted everything to be perfect. Please find them, Damien. Find our little girl, tell her about me, and please let her fill the hole I know my leaving will create in your heart. Love her enough for the both of us. All my love, forever." Alana Damien sank to the concrete floor of the storage unit, the letter clutched in his hand. The sterile, cold air was thick with the dust of the past. A single hot tear traced a path down his cheek, the first he had shed in 5 years. It felt like a crack in a dam. Then came another, and another. The grief he had suppressed for so long, the cold stone he had built around his heart, shattered. It wasn't just grief for Alana anymore. It was grief for the lost years, for the secret she had carried, for the little girl who had been living in the shadows of his life. He was a father. The word was both a revelation and an indictment. He was a father who had been absent, a ghost in his own child's life. The confirmation didn't bring peace. It brought a terrifying, urgent clarity. His world hadn't just been fractured. It had been obliterated, and a new one was being born from the rubble. He had to get to her. He had to fix this. But how? How does a man who builds skyscrapers and trades in billions begin to build a bridge to a 6-year-old girl? He had no idea where to start. The weight of Alana's letter was heavier than any stock portfolio. It was a map to a treasure he didn't know how to claim. Damien returned to his penthouse not with a sense of triumph, but with a profound and humbling terror. He, a man who could bend markets to his will, was utterly inept in the face of this fragile human challenge. He couldn't just show up on Sarah Jenkins's doorstep brandishing a DNA test and a secret letter. Sarah had kept her promise to Alana for 6 years. She had raised his daughter on her own, shielding her, providing for her with what little she had. To her, he wasn't Damien Sterling, grieving husband. He was a stranger, a powerful, intimidating figure who had suddenly taken an interest in her life. She would see him as a threat, and she would be right to do so. Her wariness was a fortress built to protect Maya, and he was the invading army. He needed a strategy, not of corporate takeover, but of delicate infiltration. The first step was the job. It was the only legitimate connection he had to them. He called his head of HR, a woman named Eleanor Vance, who had been with him for over a decade. "Eleanor," he said, his voice measured, betraying none of the turmoil within. "The administrative position. I've made a decision. I want to hire Sarah Jenkins." There was a beat of silence. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, her qualifications were modest. The other candidates were far more experienced. Her interview was impressive, Damien lied smoothly. She showed poise under pressure. "I'm creating a new position for her. Special Projects Coordinator, directly under my executive office. The salary should be triple what was advertised for the admin role. Full benefits. And enroll her child in the corporate daycare program. Expedite it." "Triple the salary? Mr. Sterling, that's—" "A sound investment in talent, Eleanor. Make it happen." He hung up, feeling a grim satisfaction. He was using the only tool he knew, money. He was buying proximity. It felt crude, manipulative, but it was a start. 2 days later, Sarah Jenkins walked into the gleaming lobby of Sterling Innovations, not as a nervous applicant, but as an employee. Damien watched from his office window via the security feed as she was given her ID badge. He saw the look of stunned disbelief on her face. He had orchestrated this, pulled the strings, and now she was here, inside his world. He arranged for his first encounter to seem accidental. He knew Maya would be at the newly christened Little Innovators Daycare Center on the building's 3rd floor, a facility he had ordered to be renovated and upgraded overnight, with a budget that could have funded a small school. He walked in, feigning an inspection. Maya was there, sitting at a small table, concentrating fiercely on a drawing. She was using a bright yellow crayon. Sarah was standing near the door, speaking with the daycare supervisor, her posture still radiating a kind of anxious gratitude. "Mr. Sterling," the supervisor said, her voice full of surprise. "We weren't expecting you." "Just ensuring our new facility meets the Sterling standard," he said, his voice a calm, practiced baritone. His eyes, however, were locked on Maya. The little girl looked up, her crayon pausing. She recognized him. He saw a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, not fear. He walked closer, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. "What are you drawing?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. She held it up for him to see. It was a drawing of a yellow sun with a huge smile, shining down on a small brown house with a red door. A stick figure of a woman and a smaller stick figure of a girl stood beside it. "It's my house," she said proudly. "And that's me and Mommy." "It's a very happy picture," Damien said, the words feeling foreign and inadequate in his mouth. He looked at the simple, joyful drawing and then thought of his own home, a place of gray and black and white, a place without a single crayon mark on its pristine walls. Sarah approached, a protective hand landing on Maya's shoulder. "Maya, don't bother Mr. Sterling." Her voice was polite, but her eyes were searching his, filled with a cautious suspicion. "Why are you here? Why are you talking to my daughter?" He could hear the unspoken questions as clearly as if she had shouted them. "She's no bother at all," Damien said, forcing a small, tight smile. "She's a talented artist." He looked from Sarah to Maya and back again. "I'm glad to see you're both settling in well." He retreated, feeling as though he had just navigated a minefield. The interaction had lasted less than a minute. but it had drained him more than any boardroom battle. Sarah's distrust was a palpable force. He was a puzzle she was trying to solve, and her instincts were telling her that the pieces didn't fit. A billionaire CEO doesn't personally hire a struggling single mother for a high-paying job and then casually visit her child at daycare. Over the next few weeks, he maintained this delicate dance. He created reasons for Sarah to report to him directly, asking for her input on trivial special projects he invented on the spot. He wanted to understand the woman who had raised his daughter. He found her to be intelligent, resourceful, and fiercely proud. She never complained about her past struggles, but he could see the relief in her eyes, the way the lines of worry around her mouth were slowly softening. She was a good mother, a great one. His interactions with Maya were even more carefully choreographed. A brief hello in the hallway, a moment at the daycare. He learned that her favorite color was yellow, that she loved stories about dragons, and that she was afraid of thunderstorms. Each new fact was a jewel he hoarded. He was building a fragile bridge, one plank at a time, but he knew it was built on a foundation of deceit. Sarah's gratitude was directed at a benevolent benefactor, not the biological father of her child who was too much of a coward to tell her the truth. The chasm of his secret remained between them, wide and deep and perilous. The turning point, the moment a single plank of the bridge solidified into something more, came unexpectedly. The company was hosting its annual family picnic, a large affair held in a sprawling private park outside the city. Damien usually made a brief perfunctory appearance before leaving. This year, he stayed. He watched from a distance as Sarah and Maya navigated the festivities. Maya, usually so confident, seemed overwhelmed by the crowd of new faces, the boisterous children of other executives. She clung to Sarah's side, her earlier excitement gone. Damien saw a group of older boys, sons of one of his vice presidents, laughing and pointing at Maya's simple, homemade dress amidst their own designer clothes. One of them, a boy named Leo, walked up to her. "Why are you dressed like that?" he asked, his voice laced with the casual cruelty of a privileged child. "My dad says your mom used to be a waitress." Maya shrank back, her eyes welling up with tears. Sarah, who had been getting them drinks, saw what was happening and started rushing over, her face a thundercloud of protective fury. But Damien was closer. Before he even consciously decided to move, he was there. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't pull rank. He simply knelt, putting himself on eye level with the children. The boys fell silent, shocked to see the formidable Mr. Sterling crouching in the grass. He ignored them completely and spoke to Maya, his voice low and calm. "I used to be afraid of big parties too," he said. The confession was spontaneous, a truth plucked from a part of himself he had long since buried. "When I was a little boy, I would hide behind my mother's legs." Maya looked up at him, a tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. "Really?" she whispered. "Really," he said. "And you know what my mother told me? She said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing you're scared of anyway. And she said that real style isn't about the clothes you wear, but about the kindness in your heart." He glanced up at the stunned group of boys. "It's a lesson some people are still learning." He offered his hand to Maya. "Would you do me the honor of sharing a hot dog with me? I hear they're terrible, but we can be brave together." A small watery smile touched Maya's lips. She looked from his outstretched hand to her mother, who had stopped a few feet away, her expression a complex mixture of shock, anger, and something else, something softer. Sarah gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Maya placed her small hand in his. It was the first time they had ever touched. Her hand was warm and trusting in his large one. As he stood up, leading her toward the food tent, a jolt went through him. It was a current of pure, unadulterated connection. This was real. More real than any business deal, any stock ticker, any financial report. Later that day, as the picnic was winding down, Maya ran up to him, her earlier shyness completely gone. She threw her arms around his legs in a spontaneous, powerful hug. "Thank you for being my friend," she mumbled into the fabric of his expensive trousers. Damien froze, his body rigid with unfamiliarity. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he reached down and patted her on the back. His hand rested on her small shoulder blade, and he could feel the vibrant, living warmth of her. Over her head, he saw Sarah watching them. The suspicion in her eyes had not vanished, but it was now joined by a grudging respect, a confusion. He had protected her child. He had been kind. In that moment, he wasn't the powerful CEO or the mysterious benefactor. He was just a man, being gentle with a little girl. As he drove home that evening, the phantom sensation of Maya's hug lingered. The careful, calculated distance he had maintained was gone, shattered by a single, unprompted act of affection. The bridge he was building was no longer just about duty or righting a past wrong. His protective instincts were solidifying into something deeper, something he recognized with a jolt of terror and wonder. It was love, a fierce, untamed, and unconditional love for this little girl who was his daughter. And with that love came a new and terrifying vulnerability. He now had something to lose. The fragile piece of Damien's new routine was a delicate bubble, and Victoria Vance was the needle poised to pop it. Victoria was not just a board member at Sterling Innovations. She had, until recently, been his fiancée. Theirs was a union of dynasties, a strategic alliance designed to merge her family's old money real estate empire with his new money tech behemoth. It was a loveless, pragmatic arrangement that had suited Damien's emotional numbness perfectly. He had ended it a month ago, citing a need to refocus his energies, a vague excuse that Victoria had not taken well. She watched him now with the sharp, predatory eyes of a hawk whose kill had been stolen. She saw the changes in him, the slight softening of his ruthless demeanor, the canceled evening meetings, the strange new line item in the corporate budget for an on-site daycare that seemed to command an inordinate amount of his attention. She began to observe. Victoria first noticed his interactions with Sarah Jenkins. She saw the way Damien's gaze would follow the quiet, unassuming woman in the hallways. She saw the special projects that were transparently flimsy excuses for one-on-one meetings. At first, she diagnosed it as a simple, foolish infatuation, a powerful man becoming besotted with a lower-status employee. It was pathetic, but manageable. But then she saw him with the child. From her own corner office, which overlooked the private executive terrace, she saw Damien sitting on a bench one afternoon with Maya. He wasn't talking business. He was listening, his head inclined with an intensity she had only ever seen him direct at a market projection chart. As the little girl chattered on, gesturing wildly with a half-eaten cookie, the sight was so incongruous, so utterly out of character, that it set off alarms in Victoria's astute, suspicious mind. This wasn't a simple affair. This was something else. Her investigation was swift and ruthless, a mirror of Damien's own but stripped of any sentiment. She hired the best private investigator money could buy, a man with no morals and a sterling record of unearthing secrets. He didn't just find public records, he bribed a disgruntled former clerk from the now-defunct Willow Creek Clinic. The report landed on Victoria's desk a week later. Surrogacy, Alana Sterling, Sarah Jenkins, the blank space on a birth certificate. It was all there. Victoria stared at the photograph of Maya, the child's resemblance to the deceased Alana, now screamingly obvious. The revelation did not incite jealousy in the romantic sense. Victoria had never loved Damien. What she felt was a cold, calculated fury. This child, this secret heir, was a threat. A biological heir would have a stronger claim to the Sterling Empire than any wife by merger. The child's existence complicated everything, jeopardizing the power and control she had been maneuvering towards for years. The girl and her common-law mother were not just a distraction. They were a direct threat to her future. She had to be neutralized. Victoria chose her moment with surgical precision. The annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was the pinnacle of the city's social calendar, a night where wealth and power mingled under the glittering chandeliers of the Grand Imperial Ballroom. It was an event Damien had to attend, a command performance for his own brand. Sarah, as part of his executive office, was also required to be there, helping to coordinate the evening. Maya was with a trusted sitter Damien had hired. Damien found the event suffocating. The endless pleasantries, the glad handing, the fawning praise. It all felt hollow now. His mind kept drifting to Maya, wondering if she was asleep, if she had remembered to brush her teeth. He felt a powerful urge to leave, to go check on her, an impulse so alien to his former self that it was disorienting. He was speaking with the mayor when Victoria glided up to them, a vision in emerald silk, her smile as sharp and brilliant as a shard of glass. "Damien, darling," she cooed, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "You look 1,000,000 miles away." She turned her smile to the mayor. "He's been so paternal lately. It's very sweet." Damien felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He knew that tone. It was the sound of a snake charming its victim before it strikes. He saw Sarah across the room, directing caterers, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the couture gowns surrounding her. She looked competent and composed, but he could see the slight tension in her shoulders. She was as out of her element as he now felt. Victoria followed his gaze. "Ah, there's your little project," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper meant only for him. "You know, people are starting to talk. The sudden promotion, the exorbitant salary, and the child, the one who looks so remarkably like poor dear Alana." Damien's blood ran cold. "Victoria, don't." Her smile widened, all teeth. "Oh, I'm just concerned for you, darling, for the company's reputation. A man in your position, with your history of grief, it looks like you're being taken for a ride. A desperate woman, a conveniently fatherless child. It's a classic sordid story, one the tabloids would pay a fortune for." The threat was unmistakable, hanging in the air between them, as gaudy and sharp as her diamond earrings. She was holding a knife to the heart of his new, fragile world. "What do you want, Victoria?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "The merger, of course," she said smoothly. "As we planned. Our families, our companies, united. Announce our re-engagement tonight. Show the world that you are stable, that you are moving on, that you are not being victimized by some grifter from the outer boroughs. Secure your legacy, our legacy. And this unpleasantness with the waitress and her child can remain our little secret." He looked at her perfectly coiffed hair, her expensive jewels, her cold, transactional heart. She was the embodiment of the world he used to inhabit, a world of surfaces and strategies, where even human beings were assets to be leveraged or liabilities to be managed. She saw Maya not as a child, but as a liability. Across the room, Sarah caught his eye, a fleeting look of concern on her face. She had seen the tension in his exchange with Victoria. In that moment, the choice became blindingly clear. There were two worlds before him, the cold, glittering cage of his past, and the warm, complicated, terrifyingly real world that Maya represented. He felt a sudden, violent storm brewing inside him, a tempest of protective fury that dwarfed any ambition he had ever felt. The sky outside the ballroom's grand windows seemed to darken in sympathy, the first rumbles of a distant summer thunderstorm echoing the one in his soul. This was no longer a negotiation, it was a war. The gala devolved into a nightmare of veiled threats and forced smiles. Victoria shadowed him, a beautiful predator circling her prey, her presence a constant, chilling reminder of the ultimatum she had delivered. Damien moved through the opulent ballroom like a ghost, his mind racing. He saw Sarah, her face etched with a growing anxiety, as she watched the dynamic between him and his ex-fiancée. She knew something was wrong. Her instincts, honed by years of struggle, were screaming. The storm that had been a distant rumble broke with sudden dramatic force. Rain lashed against the tall, arched windows of the ballroom, and a crack of thunder silenced the string quartet for a moment. The storm outside was a perfect mirror for the one raging within him. It was then that his phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. It was Sarah. He frowned. She was 50 feet away. "Why would she be calling him?" he answered, his back to Victoria. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. "It's not me," Sarah's voice came through, strained and panicked. "It's the sitter. She just called me. It's Maya." Damien's world contracted to the sound of her voice. "What about Maya? Is she all right?" "It's her breathing. She's wheezing. The sitter said it came on so suddenly. She thinks it's an asthma attack. The sitter called for an ambulance, but with this storm, they're saying it could be delayed." Asthma. The word hit him with the force of a physical blow. In Alana's journal, among her fears about pregnancy, she had mentioned her own childhood asthma, a condition she had mostly outgrown, but which had left a legacy of respiratory sensitivity, a genetic inheritance. "I'm on my way," Damien said, his decision instantaneous and absolute. He turned, his path to the exit, blocked by Victoria and her father, a formidable old patriarch with eyes like chips of ice. They had been watching him, waiting. "Damien, a word," Mr. Vance said, his voice a low growl of authority. "My daughter has informed me of your distraction. We have the final merger papers ready to sign, in my briefcase. We can announce the union of our two great houses tonight. Put an end to this foolishness." Damien looked from the old man's implacable face to Victoria's triumphant smirk. They saw this as their moment of victory, the final checkmate. They saw a business deal, a strategic move. He saw a prison. In that instant, everything crystallized. The years of empty ambition, the hollow pursuit of more, the sterile perfection of his life. It all crumbled to dust. The only thing that mattered was the sound of a little girl wheezing, the image of her frightened face. His daughter. "There will be no merger," Damien said, his voice ringing with a clarity and power that stunned them into silence. "Not tonight. Not ever." He pushed past them, ignoring their sputtering protests. He strode across the ballroom floor, his long-legged pace eating up the distance. The crowd parted before him, sensing the urgency, the raw force of his intention. He reached Sarah, who was standing frozen, her phone still clutched in her hand, her face pale with terror. He took her by the arm. "Come with me," he said. It was not a request. It was a promise. "We're going to her." They left the glittering gala behind, walking out of the grand entrance and into the raging storm. The wind and rain whipped at them, soaking his tuxedo and her simple black dress in seconds. His driver, alerted by a text, had the car waiting, its engine humming. As they sped through the rain-slicked streets, the city a blur of weeping neon, Sarah finally spoke, her voice shaking. Why are you doing this? Leaving your own party, your business?" Damien looked at her, at this strong, proud woman who had been through so much, who had protected his child without ever asking for anything. The lies, The careful strategies, the gradual infiltration, it was all over. The time for truth had come, delivered in the heart of a storm. "Because she's my daughter Sarah," he said, the words raw, stripped of all artifice. "Maya is my daughter too." Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief, then a dawning, horrified understanding. The strange interest, the high-paying job, the kindness to Maya, all the pieces of the puzzle she couldn't solve, slammed into place. "Alana," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drumming of the rain on the roof. "I found her letter," he said softly. "I know everything." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, mingling with the raindrops on her cheeks from their run to the car. They were not tears of sorrow, but of 6 years of stored fear, of solitude, of the immense burden of the secret she had carried alone. It was a dam breaking. They arrived at her modest apartment building just as a paramedic team was struggling to get a gurney through the narrow hallway. Damien took charge, his voice a calm, commanding presence in the chaos. He spoke to the paramedics, learning the severity of the situation. He was on the phone arranging for a pediatric respiratory specialist, the best in the country, to meet them at the top private hospital in the city, overriding any protocol. He moved with a purpose and ferocity that left everyone in his wake. He was no longer a businessman, he was a father. He saw Maya on the gurney, her small face pale, her breathing shallow and labored. A nebulizer mask strapped over her face. Her eyes, so like Alana's, were wide with fear. She saw him, and a flicker of recognition, of trust, crossed her face. She reached out a small hand. Damien took it, his large hand enveloping hers. "I'm here, Maya," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." He looked up and met Sarah's gaze over the gurney. In her eyes he saw the last walls of her suspicion and distrust crumble, washed away by the storm. She saw him not as a billionaire or a benefactor, but as a man who had just thrown away an empire for the sake of their child. And in that moment, in the heart of the crisis, their shared love for Maya forged a new, unbreakable bond. He had not just earned her trust, he had earned his place by her side. The aftermath of the storm was a strange, quiet dawn. Maya was stable, sleeping soundly in a private room at the hospital, the gentle hiss of an oxygen machine the only sound. Damien had not left her side all night. He sat in a chair by her bed, still in his damp, wrinkled tuxedo, watching the steady rise and fall of her small chest. He had never felt so exhausted or so completely, utterly alive. Sarah sat in the chair opposite him, a hospital blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The silence between them was no longer one of suspicion or secrets, but of shared relief and the daunting weight of a new reality. "She told me about you," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence. "Alana. She told me how much she loved you, how you were her rock, her ambition. She was so proud of you." "I was a fool," Damien said, his voice raw. "I was so busy building a kingdom I didn't see the queen who was standing right beside me. I didn't see her fears. I didn't know she had given me the one thing that mattered." He looked at Maya's sleeping face. Until now. He finally told her everything. About finding the journal, the letter. About Victoria and her threats. About the choice he had made in the ballroom, a choice that felt less like a sacrifice and more like a liberation. As he spoke, Sarah listened, her expression softening. She told him of her own struggles, the fear and loneliness of the past 6 years, the fierce, all-consuming love for Maya that had kept her going. They were two strangers from two different worlds who had been bound together by their love for the same woman, and now by their shared love for her child. Later that morning, his phone began to buzz incessantly. His CFO, his legal team, the board. The world he had abandoned last night was demanding his return. He ignored it. He silenced the phone and put it away. Victoria, however, was not a woman to be ignored. She appeared at the hospital, her fury a cold, controlled inferno. She found him in the waiting area while Sarah was with the doctor. "You have ruined everything," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You threw away a multi-billion-dollar merger for a waitress." "I chose my daughter," Damien corrected her, his voice calm and steady. "Something you will never understand. You see people as assets, Victoria. I'm finally learning to see them as family." "You will regret this," she sneered. "I will leak this story to every news outlet." Grieving billionaire duped by conniving surrogate. Your reputation will be in ashes. Damien simply looked at her, a deep, profound pity in his eyes. "Go ahead," he said. "The man you're trying to destroy doesn't exist anymore. He died last night in a ballroom." He turned his back on her and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the sterile hospital corridor, her power useless, her threats meaningless. He went back to Maya's room. He had already dispatched Marcus to handle the corporate fallout, to begin the process of excising Victoria and her father from his company and his life. That world could wait. This was his world now. When Maya woke up, the first person she saw was him. Her breathing was easy now, the color returned to her cheeks. She gave him a sleepy, trusting smile. "You stayed," she whispered. "I told you," he said, his voice thick. "I'm not going anywhere." He looked over at Sarah, who stood in the doorway, a true, warm smile finally reaching her eyes. A new family, forged in secrets and solidified in crisis, was taking its first tentative breath in the quiet morning light. 1 year later. The sun of a late autumn afternoon cast long, golden shadows across a sprawling lawn. The sterile, glass-walled penthouse was a distant memory, sold and dismantled. Damien now lived in a house, a real home, with warm wood floors, comfortable, sprawling sofas, and crayon drawings taped proudly to the refrigerator. In the backyard, the sound of laughter echoed. Damien, his tie discarded and his sleeves rolled up, was pushing Maya on a swing he had built himself. She soared into the air, her pigtails flying, her joyous shrieks filling the air. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" she yelled. The word, Daddy, still sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated joy through him every time he heard it. It had taken time for Maya to understand, time for them to navigate the new shape of their family. Sarah, standing on the porch with a tray of lemonade, was no longer his employee or Alana's secret keeper. She was his partner, his confidant, the co-architect of this new, beautiful life. Their relationship had grown slowly, organically, out of shared love and mutual respect. He slowed the swing and Maya jumped off, running into his arms. He lifted her up, holding her close, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. He breathed in the scent of her hair, of sunshine and cut grass. This was it. This was the wealth he had been chasing all his life, without ever knowing its name. Over Maya's shoulder he met Sarah's eyes. She was smiling at him, a look of such deep, quiet love and contentment that it filled all the remaining empty spaces in his soul. On the mantel inside the house, a photograph of Alana stood next to a new one of the three of them, taken at the park just last week. The past was not erased but honored, integrated into a present that was brighter than he had ever dared to imagine. The empire he ran was still there, stronger than ever, but it no longer owned him. His choices were guided by a new compass now, one that pointed not toward profit, but toward home. He had everything. Not because he was a billionaire, but because he was a father. He was loved. He was finally a man with a happy face.